Picture a modern commercial fishing empire. What do you see? Most likely, you imagine a fleet of massive steel trawlers. You hear the low, relentless hum of diesel engines, and you picture high-tech sonar radars pinging aggressively across the open ocean. You envision giant, motorized nets chasing down schools of fish, hauling them up until the hull is overflowing, practically scraping the ocean floor clean. That is how the modern world fishes. It is an industry built on aggressive pursuit, endless fuel consumption, and relentless, uncompromising scale. But the most lucrative, highly prized bluefin tuna operation on the planet doesn't chase anything. They do not move. They just wait. Off the sun-drenched coast of Cádiz, Spain, fishermen use a 3,000-year-old technique originally invented by the ancient Phoenicians. It is called the Almadraba. It is a massive, static labyrinth of nets, meticulously anchored to the ocean floor. They only fish for a brief, frantic window about 2 months a year, during the spring migration, when the tuna move toward the Mediterranean. They catch a microscopic fraction of the global tuna supply, historically accounting for less than 2% of the worldwide trade. And their annual catch limit is strictly, heavily capped by international maritime law. Yet, a single, glittering fish pulled from these traditional nets can be worth thousands of dollars on the global market. How does a business survive and thrive when it explicitly refuses to chase its product and is legally forbidden from maximizing its harvest? The answer changes exactly how we think about supply, demand, and exclusivity. This is not a commercial fishing business. It is an underwater real estate monopoly built on an ancient migration route. When a massive 400-pound Atlantic bluefin tuna is finally hauled from the Almadraba waters, it does not just go to a local fish market on a bed of crushed ice. The business model here is highly segmented. It is meticulously engineered to extract maximum economic value from every single ounce of the animal, serving distinct markets with radically different pricing structures. First, there is the Japanese luxury export. This is the undisputed financial engine of the Almadraba. Decades ago, Japanese buyers recognized the unparalleled, buttery fat content of the Cádiz tuna, which gorged themselves in the frigid Atlantic before migrating. Today, a massive percentage of the premium catch, especially the heavily marbled belly meat, known as toro, is instantly shock frozen to a staggering -60°C right at the dock. It is then shipped directly to Tokyo, feeding the ultra-high-end sushi and sashimi markets. Japanese inspectors often fly directly to Andalusia to evaluate the catch in person. This export segment commands the highest price per kilo, and it dictates the financial heartbeat of the entire operation. Simply put, if the Japanese yen is strong, the Almadraba thrives. Second, we have the gourmet preservation market. You cannot sell every part of the tuna raw to high-end chefs in Tokyo. So, the Almadraba relies on a centuries-old tradition of Spanish preservation to maximize their yield. Premium cuts that do not make the sashimi grade are carefully preserved in high-quality olive oil and sold in artisanal tins, known as conservas. Even more lucrative is a product called majama, salted, air-dried tuna loins. Known locally as the jamon of the sea, majama is a brilliant economic pivot. It turns a highly perishable, seasonal fish into a shelf-stable luxury good with incredible profit margins, allowing these companies to generate steady revenue all year round. Finally, there is the culinary tourism ecosystem. In Andalusian, coastal towns like Barbate and Zahara de los Atunes, the bluefin tuna is practically a cultural religion. The local economy relies heavily on the ranquillo, the traditional, master-level butchering process, where the tuna is systematically dismantled into 24 distinct cuts. From the upper back down to the lower belly, absolutely nothing is wasted. Michelin-starred restaurants across Spain bid fiercely for the fresh, seasonal catch. This drives a multi-million-dollar hospitality boom every single spring. Tourists flock to the region for Tuna Festival, turning the mere act of fishing into a premium destination event. The tuna isn't just food. It is an economic anchor for the entire province. You might think getting into the commercial fishing business just requires taking out a loan and buying a large boat. But the Almadraba is a logistical leviathan. The barriers to entry are staggering, and the hidden costs are completely disconnected from how much fish you actually manage to catch. First, there is the labyrinth setup. The Almadraba is not a simple drag net you toss off the side of a dinghy. It is a complex, architectural grid consisting of kilometers of heavy wire, massive steel anchors, and thousands of buoys. The system includes long leader nets that gently guide the tuna inward, ending in the final enclosed trap. Companies must spend months, from February all the way to April, just installing this underwater maze. You are paying for weeks of intense offshore labor, specialized marine engineering, and heavy machinery, long before a single tuna even swims into the region. If a harsh winter storm damages the setup, you pay to rebuild it before you have made a single dime. Then, you have highly specialized labor. To preserve the astronomical value of the meat, the tuna absolutely cannot be stressed when it dies. If the fish panics and fights aggressively, lactic acid floods its muscles, literally cooking the flesh from the inside and destroying its premium value on the Japanese market. To prevent this, modern Almadraba operators hire elite, specially trained divers. These divers swim directly into the final net chamber in the open ocean and kill the massive, thrashing fish instantly and humanely underwater using specialized captive bolt guns. Add to this the master butchers on land, the crane operators for the heavy lifting of the nets, and the resident marine biologist. This is a highly trained surgical strike team, not a standard deck crew. Finally, there is the regulatory overhead. You cannot operate an Almadraba without immense, ongoing administrative compliance. You pay heavily for docking rights, environmental impact assessments, and strict, relentless monitoring by international conservation commissions. Every single boat must have a regulatory inspector on board or waiting at the docks. Furthermore, the industrial deep freeze infrastructure, required to drop a massive fish to -60 degrees Celsius immediately upon docking, demands astronomical, non-negotiable energy bills. Your fixed costs are gigantic, regardless of your ultimate yield. Here is the counterintuitive insight that defines the economics of the Almadraba. Your revenue does not scale with your operational efficiency or your ambition. In a normal, traditional business, if you optimize your factory layout, you produce more widgets. If you buy a faster, better boat and use advanced radar, you catch more fish. But in the Almadraba, your maximum yield is strictly and artificially capped by an international quota. Imagine spending millions of dollars to set up the perfect trap. The weather is flawless. The ocean currents are perfect. A massive, record-breaking school of highly valuable bluefin tuna swims right into your net. But if your regulatory allocation for the season is roughly 350 tons, and you just hit 350 tons, you are done. You have to literally open the underwater gates and watch millions of dollars of premium product swim away into the Mediterranean. The paradox is this: profitability in the Almadraba relies entirely on artificial scarcity, not volume. Because the international quota strictly limits the global supply, and because this static net system only catches a tiny, random fraction of the migrating fish without chasing them, the product remains incredibly rare. That engineered rarity is exactly what allows operators to charge astronomical luxury prices. You are intentionally running a highly restricted, legally capped business to protect the unit economics of your product. If you somehow flooded the market, the price per kilo would crash, and the massive fixed costs of the net labyrinth would bankrupt you overnight. To see this paradox in action, look directly at the fishing consortiums based in Barbec, Spain. Over a decade ago, the global Atlantic bluefin tuna population was facing total, catastrophic collapse. The primary culprit wasn't the traditional Almadraba. It was aggressive, industrial purse seine fleets that scoured the ocean with helicopters and sonar, scooping up entire schools to fatten them in massive offshore pens. In response to the environmental crisis, international regulators slammed the brakes. They slashed catch quotas dramatically across the board to save the species. The Cádiz Almadrabas, which historically operated sustainably for millennia, were caught in the regulatory crossfire. Their allowed catch plummeted by more than 50%. Did the traditional business die? No. It evolved into a pure, concentrated luxury monopoly. With the supply strictly choked by law, the price per kilo skyrocketed. Companies in the region leaned heavily into aggressive quality control. They perfected the stress-free diver kill method. They upgraded their dockside shock freezing facilities to guarantee Japanese sashimi-grade perfection year-round. Today, depending on the market and the cut, premium Almadraba tuna can often retail for vastly more in high-end international restaurants than it ever did before the crisis. By controlling the artisanal butchering, the industrial freezing, and the direct export, these operators dictate the premium pricing. They transformed a severe regulatory punishment into a massive brand advantage. The less they are legally allowed to catch, the more exclusive, sustainable, and expensive the Almadraba brand becomes. Because the Almadraba is permanently anchored to the ocean floor and entirely dependent on nature, the financial volatility is extreme. The swings between a good year and a bad year are entirely out of the operator's control. In a highly favorable year, the conditions align perfectly. The waters are clear, and natural predators like wild orcas might hunt in the deeper waters, pushing the massive schools of migrating tuna closer to the coastline, right into the labyrinth. The weather holds, allowing the fishermen to perform the heavy lifting safely and efficiently without risking lives or expensive equipment. The region's quota is filled quickly with massive, fat specimens. Concurrently, the global economy might be booming, and the Japanese yen could be incredibly strong against the euro, driving export prices through the roof. In this scenario, the operating company can easily clear massive profit margins within a tiny, frantic 2-month window, essentially subsidizing the entire coastal town's economy for the rest of the year. But in a brutal, unfavorable year, nature turns hostile. Fierce winds notorious in the Strait of Gibraltar can whip the ocean into a frenzy, violently damaging the expensive net infrastructure. Murky waters or shifting currents might cause the tuna migration to stay in deep water, entirely bypassing the coastal nets. Or worse, international regulators, acting on new scientific models, could decide to suddenly slash the allowable quota for the region. In this scenario, the operator has still spent millions on kilometers of nets, deep freeze electricity, divers, and fleets of boats. but they might catch only a fraction of their allowable limit. The business could be left drowning in immovable fixed costs, relying solely on their backstock reserves of canned tuna and air-dried majama just to barely survive the winter. In the end, the Almadraba teaches us a humbling lesson about the limits of industrial ambition. In most modern businesses, success is defined by how aggressively you can conquer your environment. But in the Almadraba, you do not conquer the ocean. You merely rent a small, ancient room in it, and you wait, hoping that the ocean decides to pay the rent.